Hi guys, Josh Munday here, and you've just seen me play the introduction and part of the verse to the Beatles' Revolution, recorded for their White album in 1968. This is quite a unique tone in that it's not through a guitar amplifier. It sounds like it's got a fuzz type of tone to it. According to Geoff Emerick, who was the engineer for that session, he actually had John Lennon and George Harrison running directly into the recording desk in Abbey Road Studios, Studio 2 apparently. So firstly, the guitar that they were using, both John Lennon and George Harrison were using humbucker guitars, an Epiphone Casino and a Gibson SG, allegedly. So I don't have that, I have a Strat and a single coil, so we'll have to adjust the brightness of the single coil within the compression and the EQing of the sound. Desks at the time were often custom made for the studio, so they would sound quite unique. Now they had the guitars running straight into the desk because John Lennon apparently liked that fuzz sound that was quite popular at the time, and they drove the input on the desk, so they get quite a distorted sound from the channel of the desk. But apparently Lennon wasn't that happy with that amount of fuzz, so he actually took one output from that channel and into the next channel to even drive it even harder. And as Geoff Emerick said, if he was the studio manager at the time, he would have fired himself for doing that because it could overheat the desk and cause some major damage. But that is the sound. Now let's break that tone down into the four elements of tone, I like to call them. So that's the guitar, the pickup and any pickup selection that's on that guitar, the amplifier type, and then any effects that were used. And by effects, I don't just mean your normal chorus, delay, reverb that you plug into an amplifier. I mean anything that affected the tone, which can be the room that the amplifier was recorded in, the microphone that's on the amplifier, the angle of the microphone, the type of microphone. Was there a second microphone in the room? How did the room sound? All of these things can affect the sound. And they're not necessarily done at the point of recording. They can be done quite a bit later on in the mixing, and even the mastering can change the tone. With this tone though, it's quite unique in that we're not using a guitar amp, we're going to simulate the sound of it running straight into the desk. So for that, in the GT-1, I'm going to use a full range amplifier, simulating a full range desk. It doesn't sound like a guitar amplifier, so we're going to start there. So let me turn that on in the signal chain first. So firstly we go into the edit section. I'll press preamp, which turns it on, and then I'll press enter, and we can see that it's a full range amplifier. I've just left a nominal gain about halfway, level about halfway, we go over the page, and I've left the EQ reasonably flat, so sort of half on each of those. I boosted the mid-range slightly. But let's just have a listen to how theoretically that would sound straight into the desk. It really doesn't sound much like a guitar amplifier, and it's not supposed to, so that's okay. Now we're going to drive that amp slightly. It won't be a particularly nice sound because that recreates the environment that we're trying to simulate. Okay, so now we'll have a little bit more drive. So there's a slight fuzz even in that now. But to get that truly fuzzy tone, rather than drive that amplifier, because I found that full range amp doesn't sound quite right when I start driving that, I'm going to add a fuzz pedal in the front. Now if you've ever run a distortion pedal straight into the front of a mixing desk, it sounds awful. They're not meant to run straight into a mixing desk or a full range frequency environment. They're meant to run into a guitar amp. So it's going to sound quite gnarly and quite buzzy and fuzzy, but that is that tone. So let's turn that on now. So 60s fuzz. Turn it on, not a huge drive amount, only at 40% there. And over the page, I've boosted the tone to be quite sharp. So let's have a listen to that. Lastly, we're missing the compression. Now the compression will round off some of those quite nasty frequencies and sound more like the mixing desk environment that it was in. So let's run a little bit of compression. And I've put the sustain up quite high, so we're getting a lot of compression to the sound. And then finally, I'm going to add a little bit of ambience in the reverb here, and literally on the ambience setting, time of 1 second, and not very high effect level of 20%. There's not much in it in the way of a room sound because there's no room it's being recorded in. But I've given it a little bit of space, which would have been done in the mix afterwards. So let's have a listen how close we are now. So there we have it. That's how to reproduce the sound of Revolution by the Beatles through the Boss GT-1. Thanks very much for watching.